Good evening. In breaking news that's just coming in, the PTI, the Press Trust of India, has reported that top realty player Lodha Group has fired or laid off 400 employees. Now, this is amidst rising debt, which was reported by the PTI, which could have crossed 25,600 crore rupees, matched with falling sales. Now, the Lodha Group changed its name to Macro Tech Developers not long ago. It has handed out pink slips to 400 employees. However, a spokesperson of the largest realty player in India attributed the layoffs to performance reviews. Now, one wonders really, what sort of bad performance did you have in your organization that you decided that 400 of your employees were not performing up to the mark? That bell curve really is something that your HR team should worry about. But this is no laughing matter. The fact that 400 employees have been fired from the largest real estate company in the country that was building some of the most marquee real estate projects should make us worry about the entire industry. And the reason why real estate is an industry we should worry about is because it employs among the largest group of semi-skilled people in the country. Masons, carpenters, bricklayers, people actually working on construction sites, engineers, architects, supervisors, contractors. It also is linked directly to the cement industry, to the steel industry, to everybody who makes nuts and bolts and bathroom tiles and ceiling tiles and lights and interiors that depend on this industry. It is a gravy train of jobs. And if this industry is in trouble, then there will be a lot of jobs that have already been placed on the line. Joining me right now, my colleague Avni with more information. Avni, obviously the real estate sector has been in trouble for a couple of years now. RERA, the slowdown, the NBFC problems as well. But Lodha having let go of 400 people, why is this extremely important?
Well, Faye, it does reflect the extent of, one is, of course, the way we've been seeing the economic slowdown and the impact it's been having. The real estate sector specifically, it was one of the first sectors to get affected, and it hasn't seen a turnaround. It's just been getting worse. Just to give you a sense of how big Lodha, now Macrotech, really is, it has 42 under construction residential projects at this point in time in Mumbai, and it has a huge amount of unsold inventory that's worth about 45,000 crore. And it has, of course, like you also pointed out, a very high level of debt, and it's been facing a lot of issues for several months now. And now, at this point of time, it has laid off 350 to 400 people. So, of course, they're not willing to accept the real reason, and they've attributed it to performance reviews that has caused the slowdown. But obviously, there is more to that than just meets the eye, Faye.
Absolutely, Avni. Thank you for joining us. Of course, it's not just the real estate sector that's in trouble. We know the other sectors. For example, there was a report not long ago about the textile sector. This is August 20th, 2019, where the Northern Textile Mills Association said, and I quote, slowdown forcing spinning companies to cut production and shut mills, resulting in job losses. Textile is another massive employer. The auto industry, for example, everyone from Maruti to Mercedes is feeling the pinch. But the breaking news coming in today about the fact that Lodha has laid off 400 employees. And while this official statement from the company says these were performance reviews, one has difficulty believing that. The auto industry continues to feel pressure as well from this economic slowdown. India's largest car manufacturer, Maruti Suzuki, has announced no production days in two of his largest plants in Gurugram and in Manesar. Manufacturing will be suspended for 2 days on the 7th and the 9th of September. The decision has been taken due to a prolonged slump in sales. Recently, Maruti Suzuki reported a 35% decline in sales for the month of August.
जब भी उत्पादन अगर ज़्यादा हो, सेल कम हो, तो उसको बैलेंस करने के लिए हमने ये लीव करनी पड़ती है, ये प्रोडक्शन सस्पेंड करना पड़ता है।
तो कितना इससे नुकसान होगा मारुति?
नुकसान तो हो ही रहा है, नुकसान तो लगातार चल रहा है। बाकी ये है कि हमारी एक दिन में जो करीब 5-6 हज़ार गाड़ियाँ हैं, वो नहीं बढ़ेंगी। 2 दिन में 8-9-10 हज़ार गाड़ियाँ बढ़ती हैं, वो हमारी नहीं बढ़ेंगी।
आर्थिक मंदी से कब तक उबर पाएगी मोबाइल इंडस्ट्री के बारे में क्या?
देखो, आर्थिक मंदी से हम तो कंपनियां तो अपने स्तर पे लगी हुई हैं, लेकिन इसमें अहम रोल, जो मुख्य रोल है, वो केंद्र सरकार का है और राज्य सरकारों का है। केंद्र सरकार से हम बार बार गुहार कर रहे हैं, भाई जीएसटी आप कम करो, लोन हार्ड है वो कम करो आप, और लोन मिल रहा है कंपनी शोरूम रेट पे, उसको ऑन रोड रेट पे लोन दिया जाए, लोन को सरल किया जाए। और जो राज्य सरकारें जो काफ़ी टैक्सेस लगाए गए वो टैक्स वापस लेने चाहिए उन्होंने, क्योंकि ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री इकोनॉमी की अर्थव्यवस्था की रीढ़ की हड्डी है। तो ऐसे में सरकारों ने ऑक्सीजन देने का काम करना चाहिए।
Let me actually bring in my guest at this point, Mr. Jagdish Khattar, founder of Carnation Autos, also known for his stint at Maruti, joins us right now. Mr. Ajay Bagga is a market expert. Mr. Anjan Roy is a senior economist. Bhaskar Ghosh is the spokesperson of the BJP. Jayati Ghosh is a professor of economics at JNU. Ms. Ghosh is, of course, a wonderful, expert on this matter. It also makes me very happy to have her on these panels because it means that we have one more female voice as opposed to a panel entirely of men. So, Ms. Ghosh, welcome to the conversation. But first, I just want to go across to Ajay Bagga. Mr. Bagga, are you surprised by the information that's coming in on Lodha, the news that we just broke? Or was this expected? What does it mean when 400 employees have been let go of in this manner?
Yeah, but see, it's an unlisted company, so we don't have access to much of the financials, Faye. But overall, real estate, if you see, we have something like 4 years of inventory lying unsold. And at an economy level, both for the consumer and the banks, as well as, of course, the developers, they're 10-15% equity. But largely, consumers are stuck with incomplete projects which are at various stages. It's a huge amount of money that is stuck, which is really hurting sentiments. Nearly 1.5 lakh apartments are lying unsold, and
Yes.
nearly as much are projects which have been announced and are at various stages. So, this is a premium end developer.
25,600 crore rupees of debt with Lodha. Could this be the largest among the developers? Or what do you think the entire real estate industry adds up to at this point on debt they might be defaulting on?
Yeah, see, again, difficult to say because mostly they are unlisted. There were 3,800 odd real estate developers 2 years back. Now they're down to 1,800. So 50% have got wiped out with various issues,
Yes.
from funding to RERA to all those things. But the fundamental thing is that the cash flows into the industry have really gone down.
Two observations. One is a lot of this unpaid or likely to be defaulted on debt is sitting with the shadow banking sector, which is not in the banks, but in the NBFCs. And
Yes.
that balloon is not bursted in our face yet, so we don't know how bad it is.
How bad,
That's one.
yes.
Secondly, the thing that we should worry about, and people like to brag that real estate prices will come down. But the truth is that every Indian family, yours and mine, have a lot of our net worth or our life savings invested in a house. So even if you're a young person and you don't have a house, your parents have a house and their life savings are in that house. So if real estate prices come down, each of us becomes poorer to some extent.
Absolutely.
Is that not true?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we used to say that the difference between India and China was China had all collective ownership of land. So when the land prices went up, the state benefited. In India, actually farmers benefited, landholders, property holders benefited. So if you have a crash, and it has been looming for quite some time, Faye. Apart from the affordable housing segment, nothing else is moving. And there's a logjam. And, NBFCs, as you said, are not able to lend in
Yes.
this kind of a scenario.
Right, and I'll come back to you, Mr. Bagga, about details on the stock market and how you feel about what's going on in the stock market. But I just want to bring in the rest of my panelists at this point. Mr. Jagdish Khattar is with us. Mr. Khattar, good evening, and thank you for giving us your time. I'm very grateful that you've been kind enough to chat with us. Maruti deciding 2 days of no construction, and we understand that the rest of the auto industry has also done things to this effect. In your opinion, how serious is this? Is this something we should worry about across the country?
No, you're talking about the 2 days or you're talking about overall?
All of it,
Anyway,
actually.
I'll answer both the questions.
Yes, please.
You see, 2 days closure is not a big thing. It is in order to maintain productivity and keep down cost. You see, if the overall demand has gone down, either you produce every day 60, 70, 80% of capacity, or you close the plant for a couple of days, and the balance of the days you produce at 100% capacity. So you get economy of scale for those 100% capacity, and you save money, expenditures of a couple of days that you are closed. So this, this closure for a couple of days is not a question of, should not alarm us. It's to bring about efficiency and productivity and keep down the cost. So I'm just answering that part of the question. But the second is, of course, you mentioned there is an issue, and the closure is only in order to ensure that you get the productivity. So I think many people are saying many things, but the economy, the improvement in this sector will take place along with the economy. I'm very doubtful whether any specific decisions or policies can be made only for this sector. There are various other sectors which are there, so I suppose the government will have to take a view on all of them. Meanwhile, the situation is quite alarming in the sense, this sector has a lot of labor who are not regular labor. They come on the seasons, they come at the peak seasons. I think that is where we are going to have a problem, and I really don't see how there could be an alternative employment for them and options for them, except go back to the villages or wait for the market to improve. So one will have to wait and watch. But important is that those who are working, if they can continue for some time with no damage, that should be the first step.
Well, that is, for me at least, a little worrying. I want to take this to Jayati Ghosh. Professor Ghosh, to hear that the leading developer in India has just let go 400 people from their staff. The fact that Mr. Khattar believes that what's happening in the auto sector is of deep concern. My worry, and like my colleague reported yesterday, is about those people who either work as daily wage, they work in spinning, they work in textile, they work in cloth factories, smaller factories that have been shut down. What price are we paying in terms of jobs at this point?
I think the price is huge. In fact, Faye, we've been saying it now for some months that the crisis is coming, it's coming, it's coming. It's come, it's here. This is the crisis. We are already in the midst of it. We now know that the automotive sector, that's automobiles and automotive parts, etc., has lost at least 3.5 lakh jobs since January. That's an extraordinarily large number, more than 10% of the workforce. We know that textiles, garments have been laying off workers. We know that many of them, exactly as was said, are casual labor, migrant labor, and that they really have no other sources of employment. Many of them will have to go back to the villages. We are in the kind of crisis that we were just after the global financial crisis, when extraordinary measures had to be taken by the government. And unless the government realizes this and stops putting its head in the sand and basically accepts that this is a period where you really have to take major measures to revive demand and to cushion the burden on all of these people who are losing their jobs, we're going to be in an even deeper mess.
Right. Before I bring in Mr. Roy, I just want to bring in Bhaskar Ghosh. Mr. Ghosh, while I understand the government announced, that government departments will buy up cars, the truth is, unless the departments go out and buy houses and biscuits and, soap and shampoo and all of these other things every month for the rest of the year, you won't actually change the fundamentals. The government hasn't really announced anything to alter the fundamentals of the problem. I want to understand what the plan is at this point. And I think, given the concern we're hearing, not just on this panel, but from other voices, people deserve to know what the plan is.
See, at the outset, I must tell you one thing, Faye, that in a couple of channels yesterday, in one channel, I have told that government is going through a transition periods, and we are in the run of having a radical change in terms of tax structure, in terms of finance, banking, and all other the radicals of the economies we are changing. And so, under these transition periods, there are certain ups and downs which has been happening, and which is partly cyclical. So, we are taking enough measures. I give an example, like you talk about the automotive sector, automobile sector. We have given lot of relief to the automobile sector by additional 15% depreciation for the old car and any car bought after 31st March 2020, the depreciation is allowed 30%. Secondly, the battery operated automobile exports and infrastructure is being created. Now, the government purchase is also, government is doing a lot of new purchase because government is the highest spender today. So, the government is doing a lot of new purchase, and scrappage policy is also under preparations. So, for the automobile sector, what we are doing is not only we are giving some incentive in terms of depreciation, but also we are trying to change the scrappage policy and others so that there is less burden on the automobile buyer in the months to come, because we are already changing from the fossil fuel or the petrol to battery operated
What
to
about
electric cars. So
real
this is a
estate,
transition
textile,
period. Now coming back
FMCG?
to the housing sector.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm coming to one by one. So two major sector I'm attacking. Number two, housing sector.
Certainly,
In
yeah.
housing sector, what we have taken, we are trying to give a relief in terms of EMI housing loan. For the EMI of the housing loan should be less, because the repo rates, we are reducing the repo rates. And a couple of days back, our Honorable Finance Minister has declared some package to give the relief to the housing housing industry as a whole. And there are, they are under strict considerations. And the loan documents, in case of housing, what we have decided, the loan document will be returned back within times of 15 days. So operationally and from fiscal measures, as well as in EMI pricing of the cost, the amount of EMI, we are also trying to reduce it so that the burden on the borrower should be as less as possible. So
all right. So, Mr.
now
Ghosh, all right, I understood. Let me just bring in Mr. Anjan Roy to respond to you, and I know Mr. Khattar wants to respond to you as well.
Industry by industry, we are.
Okay, 1 second. But I'm assuming if the rest of the measures are as good as the ones you've just listed out, then there's no reason to worry.
Faye, last is that 70,000 crores, 70,000 crores we are giving to the bank, which is basically we help them to give a loan of around 5 lakh crores.
No, 70,000 crores you're giving to the bank to fill the pit of NPAs right now, which is already a pit that you've had to fill for the last couple of years, but that's not the point. I also want to point out to the government in general and to Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh.
Reducing the NPA, for reduction of NPA, we are doing the margin of the bank also.
Okay. I just want to point out to Mr. Ghosh and the government in general, as a salaried employee, let me tell you this. You can bully banks as much as you like to pass on the repo rate cut and to bring down the interest rates. But if employees feel like they're going to lose their jobs, they will not buy houses. They will not buy cars. They will not take loans. In fact, right now, they're not buying biscuits because they're afraid of not having money left in their houses and how they're going to pay their bills and how they're going to pay school fees and how they're going to pay rent.
I think I have to object. Not buying biscuits is not the phenomenon. Some of the media is propaganda. Doing this propaganda, but no biscuits has not been bought. I can't say that. Don't go to that level. The biscuits has not been bought by the common man.
Mr. Ghosh, I can't tell you with what level of distress I have to address the fact that you believe media has propaganda, and which is why we're reporting on biscuits. Let me make it very clear whose side I am on at this point. I am on the side.
You tell me who has told Parle-G has cut down the employment. You just tell me who has told. Parle-G manager has refuted that we are not reducing, we are not cutting down the manpower.
Parle-G managers themselves released a statement, Mr. Ghosh. We are on the side of the citizen. If you are not on the side of the citizen, that's something for you to answer. Jayati, Professor Ghosh has her hand up, and I'll allow, bringing in the entire panel to rebut at this point. And Mr. Roy, I know you haven't spoken yet. I'm going to come to you immediately after this. Professor Ghosh, go ahead.
No, I just want to make a few points. Number one, there's no point even recapitalizing the banks to ensure that they can lend more if there is no one to take the loans. The State Bank of India's managing director has himself said that I'm sitting on more than 1 lakh crore of deposits which I cannot lend. This is the typical situation of a demand-driven crisis. We are right in the middle of that. On the issue of biscuits, it's the sales data. It's not a question of the media making this up. Sales data are falling in all of these major areas. And then production gets cut after a lag, and now we are seeing the impact, therefore, on employment as well. I mean, to not recognize these means that you are not going to do anything about it, and that is what is most terrifying to me. This is the time when the government must, first of all, immediately double or triple the expenditure on employment guarantee. You are getting all these migrant workers who will have nowhere to go. You must provide a cushion in terms of some wage incomes being generated somewhere.
Yeah,
Ideally,
for
this
that
is a
we have
point to
rectified
also
the labour
start
laws.
an urban guarantee. It's a point.
Don't interrupt. Don't interrupt. Let her finish, please.
Oh, but listen, this is all supply side. Look, the point is the government seems to be obsessed with supply side measures when dealing with the demand side problem. This is something that is being pointed out across the board by everyone, even by industrialists now. For heaven's sake, recognize that there is a demand side problem. The government, as you rightly said, is the largest spender. Please spend that money in a way that will generate more demand. And you can do it. The government can actually immediately spend to cushion the damage, to provide more employment, to generate more rural demand, more urban demand. This is absolutely essential at this point.
Right, and I know that, Mr. Roy hasn't spoken yet. Anjan Roy, go ahead.
Yeah. See, as for automobiles, yeah, it is facing a severe crisis and demand is low. But come to think of it, it has been expanding at a very breakneck speed. So, I mean, sometime or other, this kind of check in their expansion would have come. It is nothing unusual for this kind of industry to go through a cycle. First of all, for an individual, now the point referred to that government is stepping up car price purchases, that is a drop in the ocean. That will not do anything because car pricing, car industry has undergone a change. Nowadays, car industry is driven by overall popular demand, not by institutional purchases only. So people have to buy them. Now, for an individual, a car purchase is a capital decision, capital investment decision. He will not buy another car immediately thereafter. You can increase the scrappage, make the scrappage policy easy, but if I buy a car now, I mean, in India, nobody is going to sell a car in 2 years or 3 years. They try to extend the life for as long as possible. So there will be some kind of, unless the economy expand very fast, car demand will remain a little bit depressed. As for the housing sector, let me tell you that you can do hardly anything, in the sense that previously housing used to be considered as an investment. You do a lot of speculative purchases. Now that speculative purchase used to be fueled to a large extent by parallel money, and those channels have now dried up. Now, one is not saying that you encourage that, but if you cut down that very drastically in a very short time, there is very little time to adjust to the new situation. I suppose this is a kind of adjustment process which is showing. Thirdly, the house prices were driven by non-banking financial companies as well as automobile purchases. Now, previously, if you had gone to a car showroom, some people will come and offer you credit. I mean, fund your purchase, or
that's not happening anymore.
House
Absolutely,
also.
yes.
This used to happen. Entire NBFC funding and this flow of money in that channel has dried up.
Yes.
And then what we are seeing once again, the same kind of financial sector channels are developing as during the financial crisis.
Okay, Mr. Roy. I just want to point out one more thing, if I may. Just to rebut what Bhaskar Ghosh said, he said Nobody has said that there is job loss in Parle G or in the Parle company. Jayati Ghosh pointed out that these are sales numbers. The sales numbers were very bad. The report basically said that Parle, India's biggest biscuit manufacturer, may cut up to 10,000 jobs as the slowdown bites. Mayank Shah, category head of Parle, said very clearly that it was the GST of 18% on the cheapest biscuit that was hurting. 5 days later, he came out to say that these were misleading reports, and I'm quoting here. Mayank Shah, senior category head at Parle, said that news about the 10,000 job losses at Parle G is not a factual story. Condition of job loss is actually an eventuality if our demand for lower tax rates is not met. Has the demand been met? No, it has not. GST has not been reduced on biscuits. For as long as it has not been reduced, it is an eventuality that these jobs will be lost. But I want to go back to Mr. Khattar on basically the points raised by Mr. Ghosh on the auto sector. And if you want, basically he said that we're going through a transition period. Tax structure, finance and banks are going through a radical change, and the government is in fact doing purchase of cars, and they've changed the scrappage norms. Mr. Khattar first, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Bakka. Mr. Khattar, go ahead.
Okay. Now, as far as scrappage is concerned, just for your information, when I was president of SIAM, we had proposed this in 2004, just for matter of record. You know, what really worries me, and no one is talking about it, the change in consumer preference which has come about. You know, in big cities, if you have noticed recently, there was a study for young people, car purchase is number 5 or 6 item. It's no more important. You have traffic problem, you have these problems, now you have Ola taxis and all. They find that not keeping a car does not make them any poorer than that. In fact, they are more mobile. So my problem or my issue is we need to study the future pattern. In larger cities where there's a traffic problem, there's a parking problem and all, these alternatives will be a substitute and ownership will go down. And those people who have got 2 or 3 cars in the family, even if some of them were to reduce it by 1, it will have a huge impact. So I think there is, but it will not be so in rural area and in other areas. So the point I'm making is that it's time that we studied the new pattern that is going to emerge. And what would be the effect of that pattern and what needs to be done, I think that should also be taken up without any fail.
Absolutely. Mr. Bagga, you had a point to make?
Yeah, my point was very simple on the facts, Faye, and everything is very linked. You know, you have today in the fleet example for the trucks, you have about 30% capacity utilization because there is a economic slowdown and you increase the axle load factor. So, and with GST, the traffic started moving faster, same fleet could be used more. Now you have to have a full set of reforms to help them to utilize this, then they will go. And you need a scrappage policy that the 15-year-old vehicles are still not running. Second, there's not been a comprehensive thought. Nowhere in the world, Faye, has the emission norms moved from BS4 to BS6. We moved to BS4 in 2017, that was a pain point. And within 2 years, we are moving to 6. Europe moved in 2005 and in 2015, 10 years later, they moved from 4 to 5 to 6. We are trying to achieve that in 2 years.
I want to understand, Mr. Bagga, and this is my question to everyone. It's obviously not just about the auto industry. India is a very buoyant economy where we've always been a domestic demand-driven economy. And we've managed, is it possible that these bumps are hurting more? Or something like the change in emission norms, this would have been a road bump, it should be a speed bump. Is it hurting more because of the nature of these?
Because confluence of various things.
Okay. Why is that happening? Why has this happened to us?
One, there were various voices talking, all this sham of these electrical vehicles. China has put up 40 lakh charging stations. Our EECL CEO comes up and says, I am going to put 1,000 charging stations in Delhi. What are you talking? 3 lakh cars are sold every month in India. Yeah. How will you charge those cars?
All of them?
And Niti Aayog to everybody started talking, by 2024 I will not allow you to sell vehicles. Nowhere in the world you have. Even the Germans and French are talking by 2030, maybe we'll have 25% electric cars. So then the government got its act together. They said no one will talk on electric vehicles. Keep it, zip it. Then you had various other measures, like the Supreme Court came up with higher insurance. Now the total cost of ownership, you are having 2 crore two-wheelers sold.
But no, forgive me, but it's not just the auto sector. Or this problem, the problem of our economy and job loss right now doesn't stem from the auto sector.
It doesn't, but it's feeding in, and now it's become circular. You know, that's how a vicious circle is made, Faye, because you have to cut it somewhere. And when you have a cyclical slowdown, I don't agree that it is totally cyclical, it's structural. And structural, it's been happening for a long time. But in a cyclical, what Professor Jayati was saying, you need to bring in demand instruments to make it counter-cyclical. What do? The government spends. That's the easiest one. No industrialist will spend when the whole economy is running at 75% capacity. Why will I put up a new factory? No one will do that.
Even Mukesh Ambani is taking money off the table right now.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's deleveraging. And same point what you said, even if banks have money to lend, the quality buyers are not taking, the SMEs are not getting. So at least the 45,000 crores which the government has held back of suppliers, pay that. The FM said, okay, we are paying 30,000, very good. GST refunds, nobody knows how much is stuck in those pipelines. That is really spoiling the working capital of the entire industry. So these are measures which you can do.
I just want to ask the economists as well. So obviously everyone we have spoken to on the channel over the last couple of weeks have told us that the solution is government spending. The government needs to build big infrastructure projects and create jobs and spend money and
pump some money into people's hands. Either you do a tax cuts for the middle class. You say that you buy a bike this Diwali season and you get it under ATC. Don't give me an ELSS. 1.5 lakh I allow you. Go and buy a Maruti Alto. Go and buy a bike and I'm giving you that 1.5 lakh. You can do 20 creative things. But every time that CA opens his mouth, the market falls. Because you're in denial. You come and say things like, I'm not socializing losses. What have you done with the 16 lakh crores of NPS? 3.5 lakh crores, Faye, has gone from your and my pocket as taxpayers into banks, into Air India flying, 54,000 crores of losses. Air India, it's not paid even the government oil companies.
So let's ask this question. Professor Ghosh, can you tell us, can the government at this point afford to spend this kind of money or give tax breaks or cut GST? Because we know that tax collection has also been down. If the economy is down, people are not making money, people will pay less tax. At the end of the day, you pay tax on an income, you pay tax on profits. Can the government afford to do what it needs to do right now?
I would say the government cannot afford not to do it. Because if they do not, then the economy actually just goes into a tailspin. The government has to step in and spend now because that creates demand, that has positive multiplier effects, that creates more economic activity and employment. The way to generate recovery is actually for government spending at this point because you have so much excess capacity, you have so much open unemployment, you don't have any supply bottlenecks. This actually generates more output, which over time then generates more tax revenues as well. That's, if you like, macroeconomics 101. But it's absolutely essential because if you do not, there is no other agent in the economy today that is willing to spend, as has already been mentioned. And so you actually get into a tailspin. It's the negative feedback loops that keep playing out and the things just get worse and worse. Somebody has to break that chain. Only the government can break that chain. And there are many ways to do it. I personally am much more in favor of more employment-intensive activities. For example, the employment guarantees, social sector spending, and rural infrastructure, small urban infrastructure, and so on. But there are many other ways. I take the point that we could do a combination of measures. These measures need not generate a higher fiscal deficit because if they create more economic activity, that will raise your tax revenues as well. I think that's the basic point that everyone seems to be forgetting. It's not that government only has one fixed pot of money. The great thing about governments is that when they spend, they can actually generate more income expansion overall in the economy, which in turn will bring back more money into the government's coffers. GST is coming down because the economy has been coming down as well. All other direct taxes will also come down. If everybody's incomes are coming down, you're not going to get more tax revenues. If you manage to raise incomes, you will get more tax revenues.
In fact, Mr. Khattar, I have a quick question for you. And just to explain this to our audience in a way that everyone can understand, does it feel right now like the economy is the patient who has maybe tuberculosis, and what the government keeps announcing are tubes of muscle relaxant or Move or Iodex saying, ye laga do, ye laga do, ye laga do. Look, we've announced 3, 4, 5 things, but it's not actually, solving or treating the problem that this patient is suffering from.
So your question is?
Is that the case? Is that what's happening right now? Does the government need to start treating the actual problem?
I think you have hit the nail on the head. I am not very sure that measures that the government may take in order to revive demand, at least in automobiles, it will work. When you talk to the people have just, let's face it, the market demand has gone down by about 8, 10, 12%. You may be seeing these figures of 20% and 30%. That is because the stock is being corrected. So I think it will be 10, 15%, not more, but that is subject to verification. So the point is that, you see, there are, let me put it, 40% of the people who buy cars buy for the first time. Is 60% of the people who either go for a hire car or an additional car. If 10, 15% of them were to decide to hold on, you see the crisis that is taking place. So I think it's more a question of environment, the feeling that is there, that is very important. And the market is also changes. No one has talked about consumers' behavior at the moment. I feel that in the automobile car industry, the consumer behavior is changing, and it is not as it was in the past. And this behavior will be different in rural areas, semi-urban areas, and bigger cities. So I think many changes are taking place. And what is being suggested by the government to put in more money and all that will make very little, will make some difference, but not much. It's the consumer and the people who are buying, I think their state of mind, their apprehensions, what they feel, whether they have any alternatives, and they feel there is a pressure on other things. I think all that is very important, and that will get resolved as we go along and not immediately.
Right. I saw Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh put his hand up. Mr. Ghosh, go ahead. You had something to say?
Yeah, I was just following the discussions. Everyone is complaining about a couple of things, more often government should do this, government should do that. But also I want to mention that government in principally have done lot of measures have been taken. Like I'm telling about the banking sector, we have done the margin of the banking, we have done the entire management of banking to be changed. Then we have, as a result, in the recovery of the NPA is about 1.2 lakh crores. Asset quality is about 7.9 lakh crores. We have made a very strong law of fugitive economic offenders law. Then retail and MSME loan management, we are doing much better way. Then end of the day, the whole problem is coming because we are coming from an mix era to a digital transaction era, where the SWIFT-based transactions has been insisting upon. Then we have end of the retrospective of the cross-border investment. Also, we have end of the retrospective of the cross-border investments and the corporate tax. And so there is a whole tax structure is also been modified. And so all this effect will be obtained in a certain amount in a certain time. So that particular time we need to keep. So, and
Mr.
regarding
Ghosh,
the time and again you're talking about the automobile sector, but every day we don't buy cars. Every day we don't buy cars.
But it has nothing to do with the economic slowdown. These are all, I'm sure, very good things the government is doing.
And today RBI has a surplus of 1.2
Yeah. RBI has a surplus that the government has already taken. RBI has no surplus anymore.
RBI today
if we hit a currency crisis, what will the RBI do?
No. They have. We have not taken much.
You've not taken much.
No, RBI has got a surplus.
You've taken more than has ever been taken before.
No, no, no. I think RBI has got enough surplus to take the shock absorber. Oh, maybe that could be the reason. That could be the fact. But RBI has got lot
Okay.
of
So,
reserve
so
in
tell
their
me
hand
something,
in
Mr.
order
Ghosh.
to have
Why did the
any
government
kind
need
of
to take
emergency
that much
situations.
money out of the RBI if this is a comfortable government that is not facing a cash crisis yourself? Is the government of India currently broke?
Number one, government need to. I tell you, government. There's one of the panelists.
Have you run
Ms.
out of
Ghosh has
money?
told that government needs to pump in funds for availing the capital from the bank, for availing loan from the bank. So government is flushed with the funds as on date. So we are pumping funds in order to continue the infrastructure projects, in order to infuse into
You just
capital
said,
markets, in order
you
to
just said that in
give it to the
spite of the
banks and
money we took,
NBFCs in
the
order to get
RBI has
loan
enough as a
affordable.
shock absorber. You've accepted that the reserves that the RBI has is necessary as a currency shock absorber. This is still a kitty that the government has helped itself to. How are you telling me that the government is flushed with funds? Have you seen the budgets? Have you seen the tally? Have you seen the tax collections? Do you know that the GST collection has been lower than 1 lakh crore rupees in the last month that was reported? The government's target is 1.14 lakh crore rupees per month. It was less than 1 lakh crore rupees.
Yeah, GST was steadily going high, and then 1 or 2 quarters, the GST was 1 or 2 months, GST was less. Now it will again go up because of this. Now there is a lot of floods, lot of rainy seasons are there, a lot of other factors are there. Therefore, the collection is less, so it will go up. But my question is that RBI, whatever we have given, total money 54,000 crores. No, because because there's an immense flood in so many states. Because of that, of course, the GST collection has to affect.
Mr. Ghosh, the last time this GST...
For that,
okay, never mind.
the celebrity has to be affected.
In fact, let me just quickly ask a question that can actually help our viewers a little bit. Mr. Bagga, you're also an investment expert. I'm going to keep coming back to this. The stock market is not right now a comfortable place for a retail investor to be. Because of the kind of seesawing, 800 points this way, that way in one day is really scary for someone who has their money in the stock markets. If I had put my money in a mutual fund, say 3-4 months ago, I'd be very disappointed at this point. Fixed deposit rates are coming down. So senior citizens who are watching are going to find themselves, every time they renew their fixed deposit, the rate will be lower. I'm not going to go anywhere near a debt fund at this point because we don't know what they're actually investing in. Neither do they. So that's a dicey place to put your money. Where do I put my money? Real estate, though, let's not even talk.
No, you can buy some gold and you should keep in fixed deposits.
I never thought I'd see the day when you would recommend gold.
But look at 45% of the actively managed funds have underperformed their benchmark for the last 12 months. What we are doing as an investing class, 2.5 crore Indians are putting in 8,000 crores into the market every month in SIPs. We are giving a very nice exit to the foreigners.
Okay,
the foreigners are just withdrawing.
The FIIs, so the foreign institutional investors, foreign funds have pulled out how many billions of dollars in the last month?
About 4 billion in the year to date, and in the last 2 months it would be roughly about $3 billion. Yeah.
$4 billion year to date, and 3 out of those 4 came out in the last 2 months.
2 months
Since
after the budget. After the budget.
$3 billion has been taken out by foreign investors who took it out of the country.
July and
That's
August.
also put our rupee in a fair amount of trouble.
So you and I, who put our money and mutual funds are investing, we are giving an easy exit to those foreign investors. So if you notice your shows, I have always been, last 2 months at least, cautious, stay in fixed deposit. And Faye, the Nifty has given 1.5% return January 1 till date. If you had kept a 6% fixed deposit, you would have made 3.5%, double of the Nifty.
So if I have cash,
QED.
I personally don't recommend buying gold because it's bad for the country. Yeah. We have to import gold as a country. It's not good for us if we buy more and more gold. So what, leave it in my bank account?
I think bank account, at least for now. Let's see when the government comes out with the stimulus. Ultimately, it will come. We are very good at when our backs are to the wall, and that's when we wake up. There is no other way out. This is getting into a very vicious
in your
circle.
Bank account. Remember, not in your pillowcase, in your bank account. Leave it in your bank account for the timing. Anyone else wants to make a closing statement?
Can I
yes.
make an observation?
Mr. Roy, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, there is a overemphasis on the automobile sector, I suppose. I mean, everybody is talking about automobile sector,
Yes.
but nobody is talking about unorganized informal sector. They have suffered the worst kind of hit in this, and that is why this demand recession is there, because they are the biggest employer. So that automobile sector is being talked about because they are organized, they are shouting every day that production is going down, sales are going down 36%, 40%.
Yes.
So and the kind of suggestions that are coming, I mean, giving fiscal incentives for purchase of cars and motorbikes, this is a suicidal move. In this country, we are, and then talking about introducing higher fuel efficiency or pollution norms. I mean, diluting those for the sake of selling cars. What kind of sense is that? We are polluted in this country so much. Our pollution levels in cities are so high. People are not coming into this country anymore. And we are suggesting bring down the pollution standards for the sake of selling cars. It's absolutely ridiculous. People are talking about buying
May I
gold.
come in as well?
And buying gold means you are sending your savings overseas.
Okay. I have one phone call. I have one phone call from Srinivasan. Yes, Professor Ghosh, I'll come back to you. So I think the general consensus is that the government must focus on creating jobs.
Yeah.
Because if people have jobs, if they have visibility, they will decide what they want to spend on and what they think that money should go towards. Srinivasan on the phone line from Belgaum. Srinivasan, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, madam.
Good evening.
See, I run a small factory which is a MSME.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, we were very proud, and we have only 4 staff. And I'm very proud that when Prime Minister told that demonetization should take place and you should go in for internet banking and online banking, we were very happy. And today we do 99% of the work like that only. But we are shocked that for even 100 rupees, what we do internet banking or through debit card, we are charged like 5,000 rupees if I draw from the ATM. 26 rupees is the bank charges which is charged. My bank charges have gone up heavily. And after GST, second thing, let me tell you, in GST they made a hulla that prices will come down. MSMEs were the worst hit because every buyer wanted immediate drastic cut in prices. Well, when big companies can afford that, these small MSMEs have very little margin, which is impossible to compete. That is where it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan, for calling in from Belgaum. Professor Ghosh, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you. I just want to make 2 points. One, about the automobile industry. I completely agree with Mr. Roy. We should recognize that the automobile industry really, in its current form, has no future. We have to move to electric vehicles. We have to reduce in our cities the reliance on individual private vehicles and move to a more clean and green public transport system. And in fact, coping with this crisis must involve taking into account that medium-term goal and therefore giving incentives accordingly. That's for that. On banking, I just want to say that, in fact, the bank charges is a very important point. I'm glad he mentioned that. But also, the way the government is going about dealing with the banking issues today is actually going to make things worse. In a time of crisis, when you want banks to start lending, you do not impose an extremely disruptive set of mergers, which is going to preoccupy these banks for the next 1 year. They're not going to be in a position to actually expand their lending and so on. This kind of window dressing to somehow reduce the aggregate NPA by merging some banks, it will not help. So I believe that even the measures the government claims it's taking to deal with the slowdown are actually making things worse.
Mr. Khattar, go ahead.
Can I? Yeah, I'll just take, I didn't want to intervene, but now that is being said that we need to go in for electric cars and all as quickly as possible. I think already we have suffered a lot because of the stock of electric vehicles. Is going to take time, but in the process we are confusing the customers, and down the lane I think there is confusion. So it's very necessary that the government should decide finally that what is the future of electric vehicles. Is it going to be imposed or it is going to come up in the ordinary course? Second, there was a recent study made, those people who use cars, 50% of the people who use cars today for going to their office use it for less than 6-7 kilometers. You know, I've been working on it. I personally feel if 50% of the cars are used for kilometers 6 to 7, do we really need cars in those areas where we have a pollution problem, where we have a parking problem, where we have all these problems? I think we need to have a new look, even at the commuting public going to offices. It can be a major change if in some cities, in some areas, people were to start using bicycles or other mode of transport for going to offices instead of 6 to 7 kilometers. I know it will affect the automobile industry, but
Public
it will make
transport.
a lot of difference. So the short point I'm making is we are coming with too many ideas. Some ideas are creating problems in the sense that, yes, we must have electric vehicles, we must have this.
Yes.
What happens? Customers are postponing buying, and that is why we are getting into.
So I think the general consensus, yes, Mr. Khattar, I think the general consensus has been confusion caused by messaging
and multiple voices.
Yes.
And you know, look at Professor Roy. I respect him. He's shooting down my arguments. All I'll say, yes, I think that solar is the petchem of India. You get renewables. Today, 70% of your power is coal burning. So even if you get electrical vehicles, how will you be charging those batteries? Through burning coal. Yes. So, you know, these are the foolish arguments we are making. You can't retool a factory which is doing combustion engines and say by tomorrow you start doing electrical vehicles. You will need subsidies. 42% of your manufacturing GDP is auto.
Okay.
Why are we talking auto?
So hang on. You know, again, we're going down a rabbit hole of
That's
the auto sector.
That's the problem, not the solution.
Yes, going down a rabbit hole of just the auto sector. I think what we've come back to.
Why I'm saying auto,
yes.
Faye, 42% of your manufacturing GDP is auto. You bring that down 30%. Maruti made 1.6 lakh.
That is our problem. I mean,
Maruti used to make 1.6 lakh cars. A month who's making 1 lakh cars.
Okay, this conversation's become extremely technical, but is it fair to say that the people making the decisions at this point need to be seeking advice or seeking suggestions from those on the ground who are actually managing or running shop floors, managing and running in each industry that they're making decisions for?
Absolutely.
So fundamentally, I think that what we've gathered so far for our viewers' benefit is that yes, the economy is in trouble. More importantly, we seem to be running out of time in which we have some window of opportunity to do something about this economy. The worst part about the stories that we've brought to you so far have been the job loss. The worst part of that job loss story is the fact that it started about a year ago. We brought you stories about farmers who were killing themselves. We brought you stories about factories that were shutting down, about small industries, about little shops or little workshops at the edges of all of our cities that make nuts and bolts and do small work that was shutting down. It has now reached the largest developer in the country, where Lodha has let go of now hundreds of employees because of the lack of sales. This is not a time to point fingers and talk about what happened or what went wrong, but maybe there is room here for a white paper in the future of how we got to this point. But it is a time to do something about it. There are several extremely intelligent, very qualified people in this country. I'm certainly not one of them. But if my team of very young people can put those voices together on a television panel, then the government of India can certainly seek their help. And I'm sure that they would be more than willing to do their patriotic duty and advise the government of India on what needs to be done further. The fundamental last bit is something desperately does need to be done to solve the consumer demand issues that we're facing right now before more jobs are lost and more people and more households are in disarray.